I'm not sure where to enter into the discussion, Dr. Mahante, but when you describe yourself, say, as an atheistic, that of an atheistic religion, and in your writings you sort of try to bring in a blend between Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jainism, but they are quite different, very different, in fact. And your comment that it is distinctively a theistic problem and not endemic to the situation that you would face, say, in the Hindu philosophy or the Buddhist philosophy, is that really a fair representation of the situation when, like, for example, one of your own books is entitled, you know, Relativism, Suffering, and the Beyond. So obviously it is a problem that you have to deal with even in Hinduism. The whole idea of karma and reincarnation is that. So it is part of the problem for those philosophies too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what I wanted to say is that I agreed with you that there is no problem of evil in naturalistic philosophies. And the problem arises only within the religious traditions. Now, the religious traditions may be either theistic, and we know the whole long tradition of Christian theology is trying to deal with this problem with a great deal of intellectual subtlety. But there is also the long tradition of the Hindu and the Buddhistic religions trying to deal with this problem. Hinduism wavers between a kind of theism, a provisional theism, and a large pantheism, right, to which I owe perhaps my belief in the sacredness of all things, right, without removing the source of the sacredness to a transcendent being. Nature, living beings are sacred. And within that worldview, I find the beginnings also of the problem of suffering, because in some way, unmerited pain and suffering cannot simply be taken as sacred, and yet not also as profane. They have an ambiguous position between profanity and sacredness, and that's what I wanted to draw attention to, not solve any problem. But the problem does arise as soon as you believe in the sacredness of all living beings.
Don't you think the problem arises even when you don't believe in the sacredness, and that's why some irreligious people start looking to religion for answers?
Oh yeah, they might. The problem is, you see, the answer to the questions are extremely relative to what is your criterion of a good answer. Now, one criterion of a good answer is that it makes you come to terms with those things. And that I concede. Any religious faith can help you to cultivate an attitude in which you come to terms with your pain and suffering. But to say that because I can come to terms with pain and suffering in my own subjective life, to say that I have an answer to the question is a very different thing. It depends on how strong your concept of a good answer is. I think my concept of a good answer is very strong, and I don't find answers, but I find them very useful means of reconciling, of not understanding, but bearing, grieving, pain and suffering. And for some people, that's all the answer you need.
Well, I'd like the others to enter in. I just want to add one qualifier. I think in the Christian worldview, it is not a pragmatic thing that makes you feel better. From the Christian perspective, it makes you feel better because it will make you feel better, but that's not the reason you go to it. You go to find out the truth. And if it is true, it will also provide an answer. But I'll let someone else add something.
Dr. Craig. Yeah, I'd like to jump in here. With respect to the problem of evil, it occurs to me, and I'd like to get your reaction to this, that this problem, however powerful and difficult it is for theistic faiths, monotheistic faiths, strikes me as an even greater difficulty for pantheistic religions. Right. And the reason I think it is this, and I'd like your reaction. At least in theism, there is a distinction between the creator and the creation. And that even though evil permeates and infects the creation, at least it doesn't infect the being of God, because God transcends the creation. So that God is holy, absolutely good, the source of all value and love, even though the creation may be fallen and infected with evil. But on a pantheistic worldview, there is no distinction between creator and creation. Rather, all is one. All is in one undifferentiated absolute, in which case evil is brought into the very being of God himself or itself. And therefore, it seems to me that pantheism is even deeper trouble than monotheism is, because it can't make the distinction between creation and creator, and so evil ultimately infects God himself, unless we're forced to say then that evil is merely illusory.
Well, as a matter of fact, the strictly pantheistic elements of Hindu philosophy do not have a notion of creation, do not have a concept of creation. It is very much like Spinoza's,
Right.
that there is no concept of creation. There is a concept of the immanence of God in the world, or you call it God. I do not want to call it God. But as a matter of fact, the great Hindu philosopher Shankara virtually said, coming from your state in Kerala, that God is the way the ignorant person sees Brahman to be. That means it is equally a product of ignorance, the idea. One knows the metaphysical truth, knows the unity of all beings, but he doesn't need the concept of God. The Hindu philosophies and the Buddhist philosophies had a solution. Now, I'm not going to say that is a good solution or the best solution, because I don't think in these matters there is any solution. That solution is going back on the ideas of rebirth and karma. That means the suffering is due to rebirth, your karma, and there is a process through which you gradually improve your state of affairs of the soul. So you are responsible for it. I am responsible for my suffering. So there is an explanation. Now, whether the explanation is good or bad, I'm not going to argue for the present, actually. That is really a kind of causal explanation that it is due to my past life. And it's an explanation which is is double-edged. Looked from one side, it is deterministic, that my past determines my future. Looked at from another point of view, it is futuristic. That means my present actions determine my future. So the way you look at it. Now, if you noted my emphasis in this presentation, the emphasis on the unique singularity of the subjective being, the point that I was trying to make is no causal explanation in terms of a law-like statement can be a good explanation of it. That was what I was putting the emphasis on. That means to the question, the moment I discover that I have a terminal illness which is going to be painful, my natural response, why me, is a question to which no scientific law-like generalization, that given these conditions one has this terminal illness, is an answer. Because you still would be asking, why am I falling under that law? Why am I one of the statistical cases of that law and not someone else? In other words, here is a question which is the crux of the matter, which is so existential that the only thing the individual can